Chapter 1 Hangover, Time Travel. I didn't expect that the senior you had a crush on for 4 years would be taken over by that woman so easily. It's such a pity. I really don't know what the senior sees in her. She heard the voice of her best friend and watched a pair of beautiful people walking toward her. Her love had ended before it even began. Now I can only force a smile and raise a glass of congratulations with everyone. She walked out of the hotel in a hurry, singing Chungkwan sadly as she walked unsteadily, but she never thought that she would actually walk to the river and look at the river surface glowing with silver under the moon. Murong Linger burped, shook her dizzy head, and walked towards the silvery road. However, before the alcohol-narcotized brain could react, the person had already fallen into the river with a plop. The coldness coming from all directions instantly enveloped and impacted her heated body, causing her to wake up immediately. She kept struggling in the river water, trying to call for help, but in exchange, the cold river water kept pouring into her mouth and nose, and the pain like needles caused by suffocation spread from the respiratory tract to the whole body. Am I Murong Linger, going to have my fate decided here today? Just when she felt that her lungs were about to burst, a bright light suddenly appeared in front of her eyes, and then vortexes appeared all around, slowly pulling her body into it. Cough, cough, cough. Murong Linger sat up suddenly. She covered her sore throat with one hand and kept coughing. She gasped in pain. Dad, Dad. Miss, you're finally awake. A strange voice sounded, and then she felt someone tapping her back. After a long while, Murong Linger finally stopped coughing and opened her blurry and slightly misty eyes to look at the person. In front of him is a little girl of 13 or 14 years old, wearing a water pink dress with a double snail bun on her head, tied only with a water pink ribbon, with a delicate face and a pair of big watery eyes looking at her worriedly. Murong Linger rubbed her forehead and asked in a hoarse voice, "Who are you? Why are you dressed like this?" The girl looked at her blankly, then looked down at her clothes and said doubtfully, "Miss, this slave is Shaodai. What's wrong with you?" Shaodai? Who is Shaodai? Murong Linger raised her head and looked at the girl again, then looked around suspiciously and found that she was lying in a carriage. She looked down and found that she was also wearing an ancient dress. "Let me go. What is going on?" She blinked hard and knocked her dizzy head again, realizing that everything in front of her was not an illusion. I was even more confused. What's going on? Why am I here? I obviously remember drinking, but did I drink it to pieces? She looked at the girl and asked, "Which crew are you in?" The girl shook her head in confusion. "The crew? Shaodai doesn't understand what the lady means." Suddenly, some scenes flashed before Murong Linger's eyes. Dazzling lights, a wedding, laughter, a table full of wine bottles, a cold lake. The suffocating feeling came to her again like a tide, followed by a severe headache. She held her head tightly with both hands and whispered in her mouth, "It hurts. Damn hangover." Seeing this, Shaodai said anxiously, "Miss, what's wrong with you? Does your head hurt? It must have been frozen due to the rain that day." At this time, countless images were quickly entering Murong Linger's mind, including unfamiliar faces, unfamiliar places, sounds of beatings and scoldings, and pouring rain. What are these? Whose memory is it? She kept banging her head, trying to clear out the memories that didn't belong to her. Shaodai was obviously frightened by her appearance and said anxiously, "Miss, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere? If you keep patiently, we'll find a doctor when we get to the next county." Error 500, server error. 1500, that's an error. There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. Error 500, server error. 1500, that's an error. There was an error. Please try again later. That's all we know. Master? Leeching? Murong Linger thought for a moment and then asked, "Then tell me, who am I?" Shaodai blinked her eyes, looked at Murong Linger with some worry and said, "Little miss, what's wrong with you? You don't remember Shaodai and you don't remember who you are? Miss." She started sobbing again. Answer me. Who am I? What is the name of this place? Shout-Eye twitched and replied, This is the Roman kingdom, and the young lady is the third young lady of the Morong family. Morong Linger, woo-woo. Miss, what's wrong with you? I'm fine. I just have a headache. Stop crying. I want to be quiet. After saying that, Morong Linger had already closed her eyes. According to various clues, it seems that I have undoubtedly traveled through time. What should I do to go back now? She carefully recalled every detail of the wedding night, but apart from being drunk and falling into the lake, she could no longer remember anything else. The carriage walked for 3 days and arrived at a suburb. Morong Linger opened the curtain and took a look before signaling the carriage to stop, then jumped out of the carriage and walked towards the lake not far away. She looked at the calm lake and fell into deep thought. It stands to reason that you should go back where you came from, but since you got here by drowning, you can't just jump in when you see a lake, right? This would be too deceptive. All right. She had to admit that she did think so. She clenched and unclenched her fists and finally sighed, lowering her head to look at the pretty face reflected in the lake. The girl looked to be only 12 or 13 years old, with slender black eyebrows, watery eyes, long and thick eyelashes rolled up like small brushes. Her cheeks were flushed. A pair of pear dimples appeared on her cheeks, and her skin was whiter than snow, as if she could squeeze out water. She was so pretty at a young age, and she would definitely be stunning when she grew up, but she was not happy at all. These days, she has sorted out the memories of the original owner. Although she is reading other people's memories, because she inherited this body, she feels as if she has experienced it herself. She clearly feels the humiliation, helplessness, and despair. It turns out that the original owner of this body is also named Morong Linger, the daughter of the third wife of the Morong mansion. She also has 2 half-sisters, namely 15-year-old Morong Chingwan and 14-year-old Morong Chinglian. The eldest wife cannot have children, so these 2 sisters were born to the second wife. In this place where martial arts is respected, one of them is a warrior, and the other is a warrior who is preparing to break through. Morong Linger, on the other hand, has no spiritual power and cannot practice martial arts. She is a loser who is not loved by her father or mother. She was often bullied by her 2 older sisters, so she developed a timid and fearful temperament and would not even go out of the courtyard when nothing happened. A few days ago, her 2 sisters accused her of stealing the gold and jade hairpin given to her by the second wife as a dowry, and she was punished by her father Morong Lai to kneel in the ancestral hall. Although Morong Linger felt aggrieved, she did not dare to disobey the family master's wishes, so she knelt outside the ancestral hall in the heavy rain all night. Unexpectedly, Morong Lai took advantage of her being in a coma due to a cold to send her to a separate hospital in Liqing, where she left to fend for herself. I didn't expect to encounter something like this as soon as I traveled through time. In this strange era, in a strange place, and without even a place to live, how could I find a way to go back? Thinking of this, she shook her head irritably and shouted, what should I do? The snow cherry kingdom thousands of miles away. The wind mixed with large snowflakes blew through the white-capped Kunling snow mountains. In the white world, only a gray figure was seen, walking slowly forward in the snow with 1 foot deep and 1 shallow, making a creak, crack sound. Another gust of wind whistled through the valley, blowing up the remaining snow on the ground. The man stopped and shook the snow all over his body, revealing his somewhat tattered black robe. He raised his head and glanced deep into the valley, then lowered his head and walked faster. In the valley, the blue lake water reflected the snow-capped mountains in the distance. An old man in green robes stood on the shore with his hands behind his hands, but the peach blossoms behind him were blooming extremely brightly. At this time, he saw a person walking slowly in the distance. At this time, every year, he would wait here for those who returned and listen to the news they brought back year after year. The old man looked at the familiar scene in front of him, as if nothing had changed over the years, but no one had ever brought back the news he wanted. The visitor took off his cloak, knelt down on 1 knee, and said, "Master." The old man was silent for a moment and said slowly, "This year, you came late." The visitor raised his head and looked at the old man. There was a faint glimmer of water in his eyes. His chapped lips trembled, and he said, "My subordinate found it." Hearing this, the old man suddenly turned around and looked at the person. "What did you say?" The man choked up and said, "My subordinate lived up to his expectations and finally found." Chapter 2, born as a spirit or born as a loser. Then, the man in black took out a scroll from his arms and handed it to the old man. Since he and his brothers left the villa that day, they have only returned once a year, but each time they returned empty-handed. In the past 13 years, he has visited almost every city in Mingsang, and now he finally found it. The old man took the scroll, held it tightly in his hand, and looked at it quietly. After a while, the old man raised his head and looked at the man again, and was startled. In front of him was a face that had experienced many vicissitudes of life, with high cheekbones, sunken eye circles, and bloodshot eyes. A ferocious scar extended from the corner of his forehead to the corner of his mouth. This face was far different from the face in his memory. The old man helped him up, looked at the scar on his forehead, and asked, "When did this happen?" The man in black twitched his lips. "It's all over. It's not worth mentioning." The old man let go of his hand and looked at the scroll in his hand again. When he looked up again, the corners of his eyes were wet, and he nodded slowly. "Okay." The man in black calmed down and said, "Not long ago, my subordinate met a police officer in Shiming. According to his recollection, he met a woman 13 years ago. At that time, his mother was sick at home, and the medical clinics in the town were helpless, but the woman cured her. Later, when he saw that the woman was alone with a newborn baby girl and had many inconveniences, he let her stay at his home for a few days. He still remembered that the woman had mentioned many times that she wanted to go to the palace to find her husband." "You mean she is—" The subordinate took the portrait for him to identify, but the man said that although he couldn't remember the appearance of the woman for a long time, he was sure that she was not the person in the portrait. The subordinate thought that the young lady must have changed her appearance. Otherwise, with the young lady's appearance, the policeman would not be able to remember it. The old man nodded and said, "Go on." Later, the husband who caught Miss UNC was probably a courtier, so he found a carriage for her and sent her to Simon's imperial city. But when the coachman came back, he said that she had gone to the Roman kingdom. It turned out that they were targeted not long after they left the city. Seeing that the situation was not good, the young lady took another carriage and went to Romania. The subordinates inquired all the way to the Roman imperial capital. After many visits, they finally found a family. Coincidentally, that family also had a baby girl born 13 years ago. The man in black pointed to the painting in the old man's hand and said, "This is what my subordinate painted after seeing the girl." After hearing this, the old man slowly opened the scroll and saw a 13 or 14-year-old girl on the scroll with picturesque features and eyes, wearing an aqua blue dress. The old man kept nodding and murmuring, "It looks like. It's so similar. It must be her. It must be." Then he looked at the man in black and asked, "Where is she now? Why don't you bring her to see me?" As soon as the question came out, a trace of embarrassment flashed across the face of the man in black. "This? What's wrong? Did something happen to her?" "When my subordinate arrived, he happened to see her leaving the city. I followed her all the way for 3 days. On the 4th day, something happened, a small accident, and then my subordinate lost her." The voice of the man in black became smaller and smaller as he spoke. The old man grabbed the shoulder of the man in black and asked anxiously, "Lost? How did you lose her? Did she discover you? But it's impossible with your ability." "Error 500, server error." 1500, that's an error. There was an error. "Please try again later. That's all we know." The man in black looked at the old man talking to himself and said unbearably, "Well, actually, I didn't feel any spiritual power in that girl." The old man quickly shook his head in denial. "It's absolutely impossible. You must be mistaken." The man in black swallowed his saliva and said, I can confirm that that girl is not a natural spiritual being. On the contrary, her physique cannot cultivate spiritual power at all. You can say that she is a natural, useless person. Hearing this, the old man shook his head like a rattle. It's impossible. I don't believe it, unless you bring her here and let me see for myself. Then he looked at the man in black and asked, Tell me how you lost her? The man in black knelt down with a pop and said with a bitter look on his face, That's right. In fact, my subordinates have been tricked out a lot in recent years. So every time they come back, they will bring some self-defense powder with them. Who knows that the bottle of laxative used last time was not tightly capped, and it happened to be sprinkled on the dry food, so it hurt my stomach. Speaking of this, the man in black raised his head and glanced at the old man quietly, and then said, Later, my subordinate saw that she had ordered the carriage to stop and wanted to have some fun nearby, so he took the opportunity to relieve herself. Who knew, when he came back, he was gone. The old man could no longer maintain his aloof image, so he kicked the man in the butt. Can't you endure it a little longer? The man in black burst into tears. Your old laxative is extraordinary, comparable to poison. Otherwise, he wouldn't have lost me. The old man's face flushed red, and he punched the man in black several times. But in the end, he couldn't bear to punch him. He naturally knew how powerful the laxative was. Finally, he let out a long sigh. That's all. It seems that the time has not come yet. You should go down first. Yes, I'm leaving. The man in black breathed a sigh of relief, turned around, and was about to leave, but was stopped by the old man again. Wait a minute. The old man paused and then ordered, Inform the others and let them all disperse. The man in black looked at the old man in surprise, and after a while he asked uncertainly, Did you disperse? It has been 13 years, and you have paid too much for this moment. Now it is time to end. The old man walked up to him, patted his thin shoulder, and said, You can go too. The man in black was silent for a while and said, Okay, and left without looking back. The old man watched the black shadow disappear gradually into the distance among the white snow. He looked at the scroll in his hand and said to himself, Are you her? One is a born spiritual body, and the other is a born waste. This could it be? As if he remembered something, he looked up at the courtyard in the distance. No matter what, Dad will definitely find her for you. A moment later, a letter flew towards the Roman kingdom despite the flying snow. Roman kingdom. It was originally a 3-day journey, but the master and servant walked for 6 full days before entering Lee City. The carriage slowly moved forward on the streets of Licheng. Linger opened the curtain and looked at the pedestrians and shops on both sides of the street. People were coming and going on the street, and the sounds of vendors were constantly heard. Although it could not compare with the imperial capital, it was still prosperous. After passing through a bamboo forest, the carriage stopped in front of the courtyard. Standing at the door was an old man in a blue-gray robe. When he saw the carriage stop, he hurriedly greeted him. I've seen Miss Third. You've had a hard journey, Mississippi. Xiaodai quickly introduced to Linger. Miss, this is Uncle Fu, the housekeeper here. As Uncle Fu said that, he helped Xiaodai take off the luggage from the carriage and led the two of them into the yard. This is a courtyard with 3 entrances and 4 entrances. There is a pear tree planted in the middle of the inner courtyard, with dense branches and clusters of snow-white pear blossoms, like clouds and catkins, rolling and floating lightly. The garden is filled with fragrance and is full of fragrance. It was night under the pear tree. Linger was lying on a collapsed chair, looking at the starry sky through the layers of flowers. A bright moon was in the sky, and the bright moonlight poured on her body and shone into her heart. She lost her mother when she was a child and was raised by her father. Now, she has to face the unknown life and death alone. I don't know how sad it must be. Thinking of this, a line of clear tears fell down her face. Chapter 3. Handsome guy in front, please stay. Xiaodai came over with snacks, and Linger quickly wiped the tears on her cheeks. Seeing this, Shaodai took out a bag of broken silver from her arms and stuffed it into Murong Linger's hand. Miss, Shaodai secretly saved this. Although it's only a little bit, if you save some flowers, it should be enough for a month. Murong Linger looked at the silver in her hand. She said it was silver, but most of it was copper plates, and she felt an indescribable warmth in her heart. She looked at Shaodai and asked, "Don't you blame me for causing trouble for you?" Shaodai smiled and shook her head. Compared to the Murong mansion, which eats people without spitting out bones, Shaodai likes it here more. Although the days ahead may be very hard, no matter what happens, Shaodai will be with the lady. It wasn't until today that she learned from Shaodai that her moon silver was 30 taels of silver, so she could only eat porridge and steamed buns every day. When they were kicked out, their monthly salary had not yet been paid, and now they only have less than 10 taels with them, which they had saved before. Murong Linger was not a hypocritical person. Now that she couldn't go back for the time being, she had to solve the problem of livelihood first. Although Xiaodia's money is not much, it can still meet her urgent needs. But she didn't want to default on others, so she said to Shaodai, "I will accept the money first, and I will find a way to solve a problem in my future life. Just wait and enjoy life with me." Shaodai looked at Murong Linger in surprise. "Miss." "Farewell, miss. This matter is settled. I thought about going to the market early tomorrow morning as a market research." She can find a place in the fiercely competitive workplace of the 21st century, but is she afraid of being in a place where she doesn't even know anything about the 4 modernizations? Besides, God wouldn't let her have nothing to do when she's full, so he was specially arranged to make her starve to death. The next day, Murong Linger took Shaodai out after breakfast. It should be said that Liqing was quite prosperous. After all, it was not far from the imperial capital. Among them, Dongping Street was the busiest street in Liqing. The street was wide and lined with shops and restaurants on both sides. Murong Linger walked around while thinking about what she could do. For more than an hour, she visited almost all the shops on the street. After focusing on a few jewelry and jade shops and clothing stores, she made a decision in her mind. Near noon, they walked into a restaurant called Yufilu. This restaurant is quite famous in Liqing and is also one of the restaurants most frequented by dignitaries. When the waiter saw a guest coming, he came forward with a smile. "Girl, the private room is full, and there are 2 tables in the hall." Murong Linger looked at it and saw that it was very popular, so she nodded and said, "Well, let's just go to the lobby." After sitting down, I said to the waiter, "Select a few of your store's specialty dishes and bring them over." The clerk hurriedly agreed and went down to prepare. Murong Linger turned to Shaodai, who was standing behind her, and said, "You should also sit down and eat together." Shaodai waved her hands quickly. "I don't dare. I'm just a servant. How can I?" "Okay, there are no such rules here. Come and sit down." Seeing her young lady's serious look, Shaodai didn't dare to say anything anymore and walked to the side to sit down. Seeing Shaodai sit down, Murong Linger began to look at the restaurant. "Miss, you've been shopping all morning and you haven't seen anything suitable?" Shaodai asked in confusion when she saw that Murong Linger had been looking at other people doing business all morning and hadn't paid much attention to the goods. At this moment, she was looking around at the restaurant again. Murong Linger took a sip of tea and said, "Well, our task today is to do market research." Shaodai nodded in understanding. After a while, the waiter brought all the dishes, including green vegetables and tofu, braised fish, fried radish and cabbage, and half a pound of beef. Murong Linger picked up the chopsticks and tried each one, frowning slightly. He looked up at Shaodai and motioned for her to try it too. Murong Linger looked at Shaodai without blinking. Seeing her nodding slightly while eating, she already knew what to do. After she took 2 absent-minded bites, she walked towards the counter. The shopkeeper looked up at her, pulled out the bill, and said, "A total of 6 taels. Is your boss here? I have a deal to discuss with him." Murong Linger took out the money and put it on the counter. The shopkeeper buried his head and replied, "Not here," reached for the silver and put it away. At this time, A gentle voice was heard. "Shopkeeper Wang, send this month's account book to the accounting room." Morong Linger turned around and saw a man about 20 years old walking in. His face was like white jade. His soft eyes flashed with shrewdness. His hair was tied up high, and there was a slight smile on his lips. He was wearing an aqua blue coat with a white-edged brocade belt around his waist. He was gentle and elegant, with an outstanding demeanor and a Confucian businessman temperament. The shopkeeper quickly raised his head and said with a smile, "Master, you are here." Then he picked up the account book in one hand and followed the visitor, then walked upstairs. "Handsome guy in front of you, please stay. This restaurant belongs to you." Morong Linger's beautiful voice sounded like pearls falling on a plate. The man paused and turned around, only to see the girl in front of him. Her face was as bright as the moon. Her eyebrows were raised slightly. Her beautiful eyes were shining with determination and confidence that was not suitable for her age. She was wearing a white silk embroidered gauze skirt with a white brocade ribbon tied around her waist. She was indescribably pretty and fresh. The man was stunned for a moment and said with a smile, "Yes, this restaurant belongs to me." "Who was the girl?" Morong Linger said with a displeased face, "It doesn't matter who I am. The important thing is that the food in your restaurant is really terrible." The man was stunned again when he heard this, but the shopkeeper's face immediately darkened. "Who doesn't know that our Yufu Tower is the best restaurant in Lee City? Little girl, don't talk nonsense here." Morong Linger said mockingly, "Oh, then I can only say that they don't know what delicious food is." Then he walked to the table, pointed to the leftover beef and said, "Your braised beef. The beef is old and poor, but for this braised fish, the fish skin is overcooked, the fish is not tender enough, and the soup is not delicious enough." The shopkeeper saw that Morong Linger was getting more and more enthusiastic as she talked, and her boss's face became uglier as she listened. So he quickly stepped forward to interrupt her. "Girl, I think you are just here to cause trouble." Morong Linger picked up the plate of beef and handed it to the man. "Are you looking for trouble? You'll know if you try it yourself." The shopkeeper quickly picked up a piece and stuffed it into his mouth, chewed it a few times, frowned slightly, and finally swallowed it with difficulty. When the man saw this, he knew that the meat was indeed aged. So he said to the shopkeeper, "Refund today's meal money to this girl in full." Upon hearing this, Morong Linger immediately smiled and shook her head. "I don't want it." The shopkeeper also said angrily, "Girl, what else do you want? Do you really want to cause trouble here?" Morong Linger waved her hand again and said, "No, I just want to negotiate a business deal with your boss." Hearing this, the man once again looked at the 12 or 13-year-old girl in front of him and said after a moment of thought, "Oh, that's it. Then please ask the girl to follow me to the private room on the second floor to talk." After that, he walked to the second floor first. After entering the private room and waiting for the waiter to finish pouring the tea and leave, the man spoke first. "How about this? In addition to today's meal money, I will give you 10 more taels. How about it?" Morong Linger still shook her head. "I said, I don't want money." The man's face darkened and he said, "I wonder what the girl wants." Morong Linger took a sip of tea and said, "I hope I can cook in your Yufu Tower." Chapter for Your Excellency. Come with me to the government office. Lingsong Valley is about half a day's journey from Licheng. As the sun sets in the west, the wisps of white clouds in the sky become as if they are edged with gold, gorgeous and colorful, and the mist in the valley slowly rises, as if it is covered with a golden gauze. Such a beautiful scenery made Morong Linger couldn't help but stop and admire it, and she was greatly impressed in her heart. If this scenery had been left until now, it would at least be rated as a national nature reserve. If you build a gate here and collect tickets, you will make a fortune. Thinking of this, Morong Linger couldn't help but laugh. "Are you Miss Morong?" A man's voice interrupted Morong Linger's dream of getting rich. I saw two men walking slowly. They looked very similar, but one was as gentle as the spring breeze, and the other was as cold as frost. Murom Linger looked back at them and nodded slightly, thinking, it is not difficult for such an organization to know its name. I am Xianfeng and he is Xuanwu. I asked us to wait here for Miss Murom. Miss Murom, please come this way. The gentleman named Xianfeng made an invitation gesture, and Murom Linger nodded and followed. The entrance to the Moyuan Gate is a stone cave. The entire Moyuan Gate is blocked by a mountain that is too high to reach the top. Castle-like houses stand there, looking down upon the crowd like an emperor.